I used to play a game with my co-founder. When he would jump onto calls, he would always have himself muted, and I'd always see how long I could keep the conversation going just by like reading his lips and like watching what he was saying. And then like, especially on group calls, it was super fun. You guys ready to roll?
Let's do it.
All right.
Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them so you can build it yourself.
Welcome to a Predictable Revenue Account Aim Roundtable. Today we are talking about why prospects aren't replying, the new rules for outbound, and really how to get people to reply, how to find the right accounts, how to prioritize. James and I were having this conversation about why this is important, why now, especially with all the AI SDR stuff that's going on. And we thought, you know what would be a great way to round out this conversation was to bring in somebody who knows AI extremely well, who knows data really well. And so joining us today, we have Tyler Phillips, the AI product lead at Apollo. We've got James Geyer, who is the co-founder at Account Aim. And I'm Colin from Predictable Revenue. I'm going to take the side of, I think, DIY / do it with Clay / hire me to do stuff. James, before we jump in, tell us a little bit about Account Aim, and then we'll throw it to Tyler.
Yeah, we're a data and analytics platform specifically for RevOps teams. So think about combining all of your disconnected data sources from the entire go-to-market data stack into one unified layer so operators can finally get kind of that full customer journey, full funnel view of their revenue operations.
Cool. Now, most people listening probably have heard of Apollo and know about Apollo. Tyler, why don't you tell us about the specific stuff that you're working on at Apollo?
Yeah, for sure. So I work on the Apollo AI assistant and platform to help businesses target, convert their prospects. So the feature or the products I mostly work on have been our targeting, messaging, and research AI products, and now kind of getting more into assistant product.
I'd say most popularly known as the guy who gave us the download status indicator when my downloads are coming down.
Hey, you speak, we listen. That's how it works.
And for context, I think it was either on the last podcast that Tyler and I did together, or afterwards I ranted and rambled about like a small quality of life thing, and Tyler delivered like a day later. So fantastic. Thank you for that. I want to get into why we're here today, and I'll open it up with a hypothesis, and I'd love the two of you to build on this. I think one of the reasons why AI SDR is not interesting, is not as effective as everybody hopes, is targeting. When you unleash a random agent to pick your target customers, it's not going to go well unless it has an extreme amount of training data. And currently the tech tools to enable that are probably there, but they're not quite there yet where you can do it without a human. And so targeting, if we believe that targeting is more important than messaging, which I'm a big fan of, and feel free to challenge me if you disagree, then having a human in the loop for your targeting function is the most critical piece for any outbound. I'm going to throw it to James. Agree, disagree, feel free to build on what I said there.
Totally agree. I think if I take like a revenue operator's lens to this as well, like you have to know your TAM, right? And like tier it out as well. And I think what I've heard through the market with some of the AI SDRs is that you kind of spray through your TAM and beyond, and you can kind of create some ill will. And so I think understanding where you actually win, where you have a right to win, and then making sure that you set specific SLAs for your team to hit those people in the appropriate way for your business is kind of the right approach. And I do think that requires a human in the loop, at least right now.
Tyler, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think I don't know if I completely agree. So I think for ASDRs, yes, I agree. Like, yeah, burning through your TAM is not a good thing. I think probably the first thing that could be done is like just having a level of like what are the amount of contacts and accounts I could reach out to in a given month, which could be calculated with pretty simple SDR math. But in terms of the AI piece, at least from our user base, like generally people trust AI more for targeting than they do for messaging. And actually I would argue messaging is the piece that is failing the most, at least from an AI perspective, for users, because it's pretty easy to tell these days if someone writes an AI message. Although the opportunity to use AI is much larger within targeting. So I do think, I don't know if I completely agree that you need a human in the loop for targeting over messaging, but in terms of the prioritization between the two of like what you need to nail, it's definitely targeting, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Tell me more about the like where the differences are, because I think I would still hold that. Let me give you a choice. You have your choice of the absolute perfect audience and a shitty message versus a awful audience and a great message. Which one are you going to take?
I mean, yeah, we definitely would take the first. But I think the argument you're trying to make is that AI SDRs are failing because of them not having human in loop and targeting. And actually, I don't know if I completely agree.
Tell me more.
Like, I think, so the natural advantage of AI is that it can basically parse through significantly more data and discern patterns that then can be used to determine who you should reach out to based off of your historical data as well as public web data and bespoke data points that you can get. Yes, you could build that in Clay, but I mean, it's also possible that you could do this in like a much more simplified way just by giving kind of the ideal customer profile and signals and hypotheses for why they want to reach out to you and consistently testing that and more of like a natural language interface. That's why I do feel like AI could play a stronger role in targeting the messaging. That's kind of my argument. But in terms of original statement, I agree. Like targeting is definitely 70% of the problem, but in terms of like where AI can help the most, I think it's in targeting versus messaging.
I suppose there is a blend here too, right? Where it's on one end of the spectrum, you could just turn over all of your targeting to AI, give it no prompts. So I think when you mentioned like natural language prompting and actually still having control over it, that's kind of like the middle ground as well. And I think especially if you're like building your TAM over time, you have some hypotheses and you want to test it. I think where that kind of back and forth, like with an AI system can make sense as you collect more data to then unleash AI on it in the future when you kind of have that really well defined.
Yeah, I think I would agree that, I mean, obviously AI is way better than humans at all the data analysis and pulling in a much larger amount of context. I think when you look at, say you look at anybody's Apollo account, like any random, 50 accounts. And if you look at all the different sequences that are in there, there's probably, you say you got a team, you've got 50 teams, they all have 10 SDRs. You're going to have a lot of different sequences in there. There is no one sequence that's going to be, I mean, some companies might have the master sequence. I would argue if you're doing that, you're probably putting your core messaging at risk, right? You're going to have your core target audience, but then you're going to have various different reasons that you're reaching out at different times a year for different reasons. It could be conference related, it could be seasonal related, it could be product related, it could be buying window related. And I think what's missing with the ability, or with a lot of the AI systems and the AI SDR systems that I've seen to kind of sharpen my point, is that context. Yes, an AI SDR or an AI is able to understand a greater deal of these are the targeting, these are the things, but there's these outside of the more creative elements of the campaign creation that aren't really documented or saved other than possibly in the name of the sequence. And so how is an AI SDR or any AI going to be able to understand, okay, well, this this sequence name was like these folks that went to this conference, and that's why this messaging resonated really well. I just think you're missing the element of this is the creative reason why this campaign today, and that context, there is no data on that.
I mean, I think I agree with the sentiment. I think though, like there's a key distinction here. One is things you're saying that analyzing past sequences, I think that AI could definitely do that. And then to James' point, start to pick up on how it should improve your targeting to kind of, or to reference kind of the successful sequences and the replies you're getting. But I think the point that you're trying to make, Colin, is related to if you want to win and go to market, you need to stand out. And by standing out means you need to do something different than everyone else, which would be something that would be different than what AI SDR would provide, which suggests that the model of, being very creative and thinking outside of the box in a tool like Clay and hopefully for some Apollo would suggest like that is still like kind of where like the alpha lives. And it's the only way to really achieve it is by using something like that. I do agree with that.
Yeah. Go ahead, James. Did you want to jump in there?
No, I just think, I mean, there's nuance in everything, right? And there's probably some middle ground too, where I think there's some players out there that are doing some automation and AI outreach based on certain signals. And so if you were to carve up the landscape of accounts based on the data they're spitting off, I think the most obvious one is like, hey, someone comes to the pricing page. You probably don't need a human to reach out with a specific human message for that, right? But maybe for those who have never responded or aren't giving you much data, like maybe that's where you need the repeat human ingenuity to kind of stand out.
Totally. I think the like, so much of the work that I do, and like I think I have a very self-serving point of view in this because I do a lot of work with Clay and Apollo in like working with data and coming up with these campaigns and coming up with the sequences. And yes, I'd say for a large number of the folks I work with, we'll have some similarities to the messaging, to the sequences, to the styles. But I probably have 27 different creative plays or just plays campaigns that I like to run. I've got like a doc of them, and I haven't seen anything that all I've seen with the AI SDR is like here's the standard plays, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not going as deep into like, what is the context behind the play and how do we sort between these 27 different ones that have, been successful. And then how do you pick? Because sometimes I don't know. I think the data will be in there, but the data of like what's worked in the past absolutely will be there. It might be tough to tie it to like, okay, it worked because it was just before the G2 conference, or like there's data outside the system that's maybe important that isn't in there yet. I think we've beat maybe a dead horse to death on this particular like AI versus human in the loop. Just to summarize our point, I think we all are in agreement that targeting currently more important than messaging. Because if you're targeting off, if we're emailing, trying to sell Apollo to farmers in Nebraska, I'm sure there's one that's probably using Apollo for like a very niche reason, but I'd say overall, that's probably not going to be your most successful campaign. And so we want to prioritize to the accounts that are most likely to reply. And when I work with folks, I find this is always the hardest thing for people to get their head around. It's not about who we say yes to, it's about who we say no to as well. And I find people struggle so much with saying no, because they could make the logical case of like, oh yeah, I could see how I would work with a company like that. But when you do that for every potential industry, suddenly you have this really broad audience, and when you're writing a message to a broad audience, you're not really you're not really speaking to anybody specifically. So I think question to the two of you, does this parallel your experience? And if so, how do you think about, carving down and saying no to the right audiences and yes to the right audiences? Let's go with Tyler and then we'll throw it to James.
Yeah. I mean, this is like completely spot on. Account-based prospecting is generally how best in class go to market, teams or, agencies will operate. But unfortunately for a lot of people, it's not very natural. They kind of just want to get to the person as fast as they can and write an email. Like in Apollo, it's 3x more people search on people than they do on company.
That hurts me so much.
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah, seriously. Yeah.
Okay, if you're listening and you use Apollo, stop doing that right now. The only right way to do it is accounts first, define your company filter criteria, and then find the right people. Please stop.
I think Apollo kind of has contributed a little bit to this style because it's just like everyone just goes to people and they start, hit the job titles, hit the whatever it may be. And like all your company filters on the people filters. So it's like, oh, let's just go after people. But I completely agree there. Definitely the model is account-based prospecting, but in practice, a lot of people just jump to let me go hit up the head of product to this company. And they're like, why don't I get any replies? It's because, this person might be a buyer of your product, but the company doesn't have a problem that you can solve. So that's kind of my 2 cents. James?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think this is where the data becomes so important, right? And it's been surprising to me in the couple of years since we launched Accounting, how many companies we work with who aren't looking at actually the success data at the top of the funnel. And so when people are doing call it an ICP exercise, although this is kind of off, folks will often just look at their closed won data, right? And they're like, oh, I do have one customer from insurance, or I do have 2 dental offices as customers when the rest of my customers are SaaS. So I'm going to go, load up my sequences to insurance and dental offices as well. But if you were to look at this at the top of the funnel and see, how many of those companies are our SDRs actually reaching out to, how many are actually replying, you see that it goes to 0, and then you kind of quantify how much wasted time that is. And it's huge. And so I think I'm totally with you, Colin, that who you say no to is super important. It has a real cost as well if you're not thoughtful about this.
If I could take it philosophical for a minute, I think when you are as a new company and you are developing, strengthening your product market fit, right? You find the gap in the market, you find a way to solve that gap in the market. That market isn't the entire everybody in the whole world. The gap that you found in the market is very specific, typically is very specific to a certain type of company in a certain situation. And I think this is a huge thing that gets missed when you go from a product motion of you get Tyler in there to figure out what needs to be built, and then you pass it to the engineers and then they go build it, and then you pass it to the dirty salespeople like myself, and then you're like, okay, go sell this shit. And then the dirty sales guy buys Apollo and is like, cool, I'm going to go and I'm going to email everybody and call everybody that has these job titles. Yeah. And suddenly you've gone from okay, well, product had this thing, had this very specific definition of this very specific type of account and this very specific definition of a very specific type of person. And then you just let the salespeople take over and go, well, let's email everybody. And the reason that those people aren't replying is you don't have product market fit in that market. The literal definition is like your product fits extremely well into this one specific market, right? It is a very strong fit in here because this gap is felt over here. And when you go into Apollo, it almost should be illegal, like to go outside of like your initial target ICP. Like obviously it'd be a bad thing for Apollo to only sell me access to like this target list. That's the antithesis of what Apollo does because, you know, the data is everywhere. But I think this is a symptom of Apollo being great with, hey, here, have all the data. And then us salespeople are like, cool, I got all this data. Like, let me do all of these campaigns and it's just so easy to follow the wrong path.
Yeah. Which, just to respond to that, I think the reason why it was so easy is because you got results. Like, you know, people talk about predictable revenue model that you're well acquainted with. Back, you know, let's say if you know, in the time, like it did work. So like there's like a reason why like that model is shifting now, especially due to the introduction of AI, as well as just the amount of, you know, different B2B SaaS companies that are out there, it seems these days, especially in the US, all target the same people. And so I think that's that. I think that kind of going into like the, you know, not to take this a different direction, but the whole creativity element was probably less important when it was easier to just book meetings with people with like a certain number of context outreach to. And now like, you know, email templates are useless, job title targeting is useless, industry is useless. I mean, you need it, but it's not something that will differentiate you. I think that's what kind of where the struggle is. It's like, how do you get, you know, you say like the dirty like salesman like yourself, like where do you go from here, right? To decide what to do next if you don't, you know, all these tools are changing underneath.
Just to sharpen that point and then throw it to James, I think what you're saying is the table stakes have gone up. You know, the blinds when we first started were 1-2 no limit, and now they're 25-50 for those that don't get the poker reference. Like it was so easy back 10 years ago when I started Predictable Revenue, or the company that turned into Predictable Revenue. I was using Google scripts, like scripts in Google Sheets to send, hi, sorry to bother you. Can you point me in the direction of the person that handles X? And that was like the email template we used for about 5 years. And we got by, and that would book like 10 meetings a month, no problem. Yeah. And the bottleneck was the data. And like that doesn't fly anymore. And so the knowledge has gotten better. The tech has gotten better. The process has gotten better. The people have gotten better. The training has gotten better. And so as all of those things get better, it becomes harder to compete. And when we say seeking, like trying to get alpha, trying to get an advantage over your competition. And so if you don't have these things, it's going to be really hard to stand out and actually get replies. I'll throw it to you, James. Agree, disagree, care to add?
Yeah, agree. And I'm not sure if this is exactly where you want to take it. So feel free to rein me in. And I'm curious about your perspective with your clients on this, Colin. But like, to me, it feels like the table stakes now are almost that you have to be adding value to your audience, whether that's through community or for us, we do some like templates for rev ops folks where you're reaching out, not just to try and book a meeting, but it's like, hey, here's all this value. I hope you'll think of me in the future, or you'll feel that it's valuable enough that frankly, I hate to say it, but you might feel like you owe me a meeting just to see what's going on because it was that helpful. And that's where I actually think humans do stay pretty relevant. But I do feel like the table stakes have risen on that front to your original question.
Tyler, do you want to jump in on that?
What you just said reminds me of this framework or that I've been following by Jordan Crawford, so, where it's like, send me an email I would pay to receive. And like something, and in our case, it's like send me an email where like I have a meeting booked for you, like through Apollo. Just sign up and you get value. So that's the extreme of it. But I do think you're completely correct. Like that's where the market is going, and those types of messages, like to those types of people, are very difficult today to do in like traditional like sales engagement platforms. Which is why, like, and same with AI SDRs. Like, how would they possibly scale that? Kind of going back to that original point, like.
Yeah, because I just want to build on that. I think so much of what you and James just said, these are things that happen outside of the sequencer, right? Like the reason you're reaching out, the reason this campaign is going to work well is because James put a ton of time into, this particular RevOps workbook, or, Tyler, you put so much time into, this thing that's gonna, like, the meeting is waiting for you. All you got to do is click the button in Apollo, and like none of that happens in the sequencer, right? You think about like where's the value being added in the process, and we've all kind of like, with the way that Clay and Apollo and Account Name have made the targeting layers, it's super easy to have really good targeting. And so that's table stakes. Everybody expects that now. The additional alpha is coming not from using Clay to, or even Apollo to like write, personalized emails, because everybody's doing that. And it's pretty easy to detect spin tags and, the like, here's 3 ideas for how your company could grow. Like, I mean, I love Eric, who from GrowthX, that like put that together, or Growth Engine X, but like, I hate seeing that template. I always forward to him like, hey man, you're famous. I'm like, but it's such a giveaway, especially if you know.
Yeah.
And so I think where we're coming to is, yes, targeting is extremely important, but what goes into that message and like the ask and the offer behind it is almost even more important. James, I'd love to maybe dive in on specifically what is it that you're doing on on that offer, because it reminds me of something that one of my clients used to do in the e-commerce space a long time ago, which was they'd record these really great webinars and they'd build like a guide or like just a really helpful kind of like ebook. Then they'd reach out to a bunch of folks and say, hey, I just recorded this. Could I send you the ebook? Like no charge, whatever. That worked extremely well about 7, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, but it hasn't been working as well. And it sounds like this is similar, but different. So help me understand the differences. One, do I have you correct it? Did I understand that correctly? And then 2, what are you doing specifically?
Yeah, it's pretty similar to what you described, although with like different content, obviously. So we take a couple approaches. Like one is just having like the base level foundation of like community and some degree of brand awareness. So we're only a couple of years into the company, but we spend a lot of time with RevOps, and we put together like a mentorship program for folks. We've put together some content around like how to build an ICP, how to do account scoring. And then, we'll also take this out into the market, to your original question, and load up some sequences around those topics. But usually where we find most success is kind of with like the bump email on message number 2. It's like, we were just talking about ICP, for example. Maybe now's not the right time to chat, but here's an ICP template, like let me know if you want it. That, I guess, is a little bit different than an ebook, but not so far off, but has worked well enough for us. And often it starts a conversation via email. We've gotten pretty comfortable kind of doing what I would call like V0 of discovery via email, and if it feels like it's top of mind, often we can get folks to kind of hop on.
Interesting. And so you're using that as a bump, not a lead.
Yeah, that's right.
Interesting.
I'm curious. Okay, so I'm curious to learn a little bit more about that. So for that template, do you guys ever try to like personalize it to that account, or no? It's just like a general template.
It's a fairly general template. We've thought a little bit about this, but I don't think we totally cracked the code on how to do that scalably yet. And I was actually just thinking earlier on the last question, like, to argue against myself, like maybe AI does get there over time. Like I think back to a couple of the cold emails I've responded to recently, and it was about, delivering me like a consultation about some part of the business that's top of mind. And like, maybe, what folks are pulling together for us right now, it's competitor pages and SEO. Like maybe AI can do that, and it becomes kind of full stack with the sequencer and that workflow with some other agent. And maybe that's where it gets personalized too.
Yeah. You could even do like, I'm just imagining like you even can create like, I don't know how you do this at scale, but one idea is like, I don't know if you ever use like a ChatGPT, GBTs or whatever, and you can create your own like account name GBT, and then it could be like your like own like codified practice of your ICP template in there, and people could like play around with it. That could be a pretty cool like lead magnet as well. But that's just a random random thought. That'd be pretty cool. Yeah.
I mean, I'll build on that. I actually do use a custom GPT that I've created. So I wrote a couple. The context here, I create account classifiers and contact classifiers. So when I like to be super lazy with my prospecting, as Tyler knows, I hate the CSV dance. It just,
Yep.
I'm not physically touching CSVs, but when I click on them, it just makes me feel just anger, because I'm like, software should be doing this for me. And so I wrote these classifier prompts, and when I'm talking to a client, I just copy and paste the transcript into the classifier prompt, and it does my job. And then I can fire that into Apollo, into Clay, and then go and run it on only 10,000 at a time, Tyler.
Yeah, I still need to work on that one.
Or more if I'm using Clay. But then get the jabs in. And I told you, we're Bruins announcers for this one, right?
Yeah. What's the max over there? Is there a max?
I think it's I think it's 50K with Clay.
Okay. All right. Good
But
to know.
I mean, still, it's like either way, you got to do a little dance around it. But the most important piece is the moral of the story was I wrote these classifier prompts, and then I could pass the description of the LinkedIn or from Apollo into this prompt and then run it on everybody in the market. And I could go super wide because the best thing, the thing that makes me happy is ignoring all the cool things that Tyler built and just using the one of them. Because I hate having to pick, oh, well, is it this market, or would this company classify themselves as software or IT or this or that? And I'm like, screw it. All I care about is the employee range, because that's the most accurate piece of data, I think, in any data source, because you're getting it from LinkedIn. And then pass that description into a classifier prompt and just let the AI figure it out. And then
Mm-hmm.
have it sorted into categories, good fit, bad fit, and then a bunch of subcategories. I do this in Apollo. I just create a little drop down and I say go, and I do it 10,000 at a time.
Wait, so wait, you said only number of employees, or do you have many different, like, just number of employees?
This is why 10,000 at a time bugs me, because I like to go huge.
Well, then
And
why don't you just use the filter? I'm confused.
because the data underneath the filters is applied differently for every company. Some companies that are in the software space will say they're in the computer vertical or like computer software, and some will say IT. And sometimes when you add IT, you're going to get services companies. So I'll
Yeah.
either go super wide open, or I'll add a ton of them and not pay too much attention, because I know I can trust that my classifier prompt is going to sort them, score them, and bring them
Mm,
down.
okay.
When I'm using Clay specifically, I can use 4.1. And I just did it last night. I scored 30,000 records and it cost me $8. So I'm like, I'll pay $8 not to have to look at the drop down filters and be like, is it this or is it this? I just put it in everything. And it's helping me find data that I wouldn't be able to access otherwise. And I trust that all the way through, I'm getting really good data. To come back to why I started rambling about this is I have this GPT and I use it as a bumper email. I'll say, hey, I've got a classifier prompt. Can I share it with you? And it's
Mm,
built in a GPT. So there's no like tricks of like, haha, I've got your email.
yeah.
But if anybody knows how to do that, let me know, because I'd love to be able to like trick people into giving me their email.
And so,
Not really.
so how does that work a layer deeper, Colin? So you're sending the classifier email as value to your prospects for,
It's a value bump. Yeah.
okay. And
And
so
so
they're
I'm saying,
then classifying their market based on their own prompts.
yeah. So
Mm,
I'm saying I use it in my sequences when I'm trying to find clients for myself. I'll say, hey, as a bumper, I wrote a classifier prompt. I built it into a GPT. You can use it. Let me know if you'd like the link.
Oh,
And
cool.
then they reply back, yeah. And I fire it to them. And then they come back and
mm.
they're like, wow, this is really great. How do I use this? And then I explain, just like get on a Zoom and record yourself talking for half an hour about, anything, or about like your company and who your best customers are, and then pop it into that classifier prompt. And then it does a pretty smoking good job.
Cool. Load me
So
into your sequence. I want that bumper email.
cool.
Do you get notified, by the way, when they use it? No. Okay, that's
No,
interesting. Okay.
no.
Okay.
So it is like throwing something into the void. I do think it makes it easier to click, because
Yeah.
people know they see it's an OpenAI link, right? They
Yep.
know it's a ChatGPT. So it's a little bit of a standardized piece. They know there's no bit.ly that's
Yeah.
secretly going to capture your this or steal your that. So
And
it's
it's actually like fun value. You can go play around with it, tinker with it, kind of understand your mind. Yeah, I think that's like going back to the original topic. Like that's just like showing value without asking anything in return, right? And that's
100%.
definitely like where we're at, I think, in the market.
I think this is like the biggest piece of my argument as to why AI SDR doesn't matter, because AI SDR can't do value first. It can't come up with this idea of like, hey, let me send that classifier prompt. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's 1,000 AIs, at least right now, are never going to be able to create that with the data that lives in your sequencer. I'm not saying AI couldn't do this. It absolutely can. I'm using it to do this, but it's
Mm-hmm.
just not available in an AI SDR product at the moment. 5 years from now, it probably will be able to. But I think at that stage, we're Skynet versus Skynet for like cold email. And the three of us are all either, James is a millionaire and Tyler and I are out of jobs. Or
I mean,
Skynet eats us all.
one thing I would say, like, I just don't know. Like, I mean, it's like the idea of like bespoke creation. Yeah, AI can create like these really weird images or whatever you want, videos or stuff. But I don't know. I still feel that like if you think about like the macro trend of like people picking auto like AI SDRs, which I don't know if it's like completely true. It's more like a trend than let's say like a true market movement.
Mm-hmm.
I think the reality is like the more those get adopted, the more standing out and being bespoke will become in demand. So it's like almost like a reverse trend on like that, like in the
A
ASDR
counterbalance,
movement.
yeah.
Yeah, at least that's one thought. It's like if everyone's doing it, then no one's doing it.
I'm gonna sleep a little easier tonight.
You should, yeah.
Yeah. We spent a lot of time talking about how to get the right accounts, into your view, into your TAM. I want to spend a few minutes talking about how we prioritize, because I think the same applies true. Like, especially when I'm scoring, 30,000 or 50,000 or 10,000 at a time, Tyler, then I've got this huge market, and I want to come back to, all right, if I have 8,500 companies, how do I pick the 300? Or if I'm in a market like, James, you and I both know Mosaic, the stuff that those folks are doing with 1,000 accounts. This is a company that has 1,000 accounts and like 10 SDRs or something like that, roughly.
10,000 accounts and probably 2,000 tier one. Yeah.
Okay.
And 10 SDRs.
Okay, it's 2000 now. My information's a year old, a year and a half old. So basically, I think it was 1,200 when I interviewed Matthew for the first time, which might be 2 years ago. And it was they were getting an amazing amount of meetings out of such a small audience. So even if it is 10,000 accounts and 2,000 core accounts, like their whole team is producing well above average. I don't know how much we can share here because I don't want to tell tales out of school. I'm pretty sure you shared most of this on my podcast when we talked to him a year and a half ago, but they were getting an incredible amount of value out of such a small amount of accounts. And a lot of that came down to scoring, obviously having the right TAM, SAM, et cetera, but then prioritizing and then reprioritizing almost daily. James, can you enlighten us here?
Yeah, they did an amazing job, and it kind of is a good case study or summary of a few of the points we talked about today. But if I try and boil it down, because I know we're coming up on time, is they did a great job scoring, to your point. They did a tremendous job on SLAs for each of their BDRs, and they did a good job of segmenting even within those scores. And so I'll unpack each of those maybe in reverse order. The segmentation piece, we actually helped them with this, is like, if I'm an SDR, I open up my email today or outreach for the first time of the day, like where should I start? Even with only, call it a few hundred accounts each, there's still a lot of data points to think about at once. They had a very clear criteria of, okay, first, you go for anyone showing signals. So on the pricing page, opened up an email from 2 weeks ago. There's a few more. Work through all of those first because they're the warmest. Next, you go through like kind of the best practice plays. So maybe it's a prior closeout opportunity and they haven't been touched in 60 days. Pick your day. Other kind of plays like that. Maybe past customers or champions who've moved. And then you get down to kind of just like the plain cold emails that you score, which leads me to SLAs though. And they did an amazing job staying top of mind with their finance buyer, which is like they're selling FP&A software. It's a very long eval cycle. They made sure that their BDRs were touching every single top account every 28 days to stay top of mind. And that's where that value comes in that we were talking about. So they have this tremendous content repository. Those BDRs would pop in and just say, hey, I know board deck season is coming up. You're probably really busy with this. Like CFOs never want to chat them. Here's our board deck template if you want it. And they had a whole laundry list of plays like that. And they used account name actually to like keep track of those SLAs and make sure that those accounts are front and center at every 28-day mark. That's how they stayed on top of their entire TAM pretty systematically, and it worked really well for them.
The crazy part for me is like not only were they bringing in their SLA data, but they were reprioritizing their target accounts for their SDRs in real time. They're also the only guest I've ever had on the podcast that has said, yes, I'm getting value out of intent data.
Oh, wow.
I've asked almost everybody, and Matthew was saying, yes, we get value out of it, but it's like a pinch of salt when you're making a pie. It is not the whole pie. It was like, I think they had at the time, like 11 different factors that went into like reprioritizing an account, 11 different data sources. And this was one of them.
Yeah. And I think we track the data for them of like, what's the meeting booked rate for every reach out that we do to a client. And that signal data was the best performing. But of course, it's like a multi-touch attribution kind of thing. And they're doing such a good job staying on top of these folks that a lot of times that valuable activity is actually what led to the intent data, right? They got the template, so they went to the website, we reached out again. And so it's like, it's not just the intent in and of itself, right? It's kind of the whole system.
Yeah. It's all the things working together. And that was the jaw-dropping moment when I was talking to Matthew.
Yeah.
Really I'm curious if you don't mind me asking. So I think everything makes sense up to the point of reprioritizing. Like, that's like something you can do. It's just about how do you, like you said, they do that on like a daily basis. How do you do that? Like, how is that actually like feasible for most companies?
Yeah. You have to listen to the episode.
Yeah, I'm like, wow, that's awesome. I just want to know more.
Yeah. So I think Matthew went into the detail a little bit on the episode, but I can give you
Oh,
the
okay.
kind of Cole's notes. One, it was all automated in Salesforce.
Oh, okay.
Two, it was what they were reprioritizing was I think they had a fairly complex system of tiered of their account tiers. I think it was 8 different tiers, and I believe it was daily. It might have been weekly. I could have this wrong. I thought it was daily. They were rerunning the reprioritization, and so every morning you walk in the door, and your tier ones are not just the way you would think about your traditional tier 1 accounts. You know, like a traditional SDR team, you would say, here's the top 100 accounts because these are the top, biggest, most valuable accounts. The thing that they did differently was a tier 1 account is a combination of like 11 different things that weighed in. But one of those things was likelihood to reply today, likelihood to be relevant for you to reach out now. It wasn't tier 1 most money for Mosaic. It was tier 1 SDR priority for today. And I think that was the big shift that they did that really makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it
You're
does.
not prioritizing total revenue. You're prioritizing relevance and most likely to convert today.
Yep.
I know we're getting to time. We got a little bit off topic, and I really appreciate y'all exploring with us because I really enjoyed that. If people are looking to learn more about Apollo and the cool things that you all are doing with AI, what's the best way for them to find out more, Tyler?
Yeah, so I think for us, you can follow me on LinkedIn. That's probably I post pretty much all of our AI product updates there, and also join or start using Apollo and join our Apollo community where we talk a lot about AI there.
Love it. James, same question to you.
Yeah, similar. Go ahead and follow me on LinkedIn if you're interested in RevOps content and data. Like I mentioned earlier, we also have an amazing mentorship network where you sign up to be a mentee or a mentor. We'll pair you up. You have a few great sessions, and then we'll repair you, getting amazing feedback on that. And I'll also just shamelessly plug, Let Me Call Him. We launched our biggest product release ever to count him today, actually. So we launched a RevOps warehouse where we're bringing together all these different data sources. So RevOps and sales teams can have kind of one unified go-to-market data layer to actually take action on all the things that you need to do. So always happy to chat about that too if folks are interested.
I love it. Hang on after we finish recording because I definitely want to dive into that. And thanks to everybody for listening. My name's Colin. I'm the co-founder CEO here at Predictable Revenue. You can find out more about what we're doing at predictablerevenue.com. We do founder coaching. We help people find their first customers, build their first sales teams. If you want to keep up with my content, I've got a book coming out in October called The Terrifying Art of Finding Customers. I also write a weekly newsletter for founders that are trying to figure out how to build revenue. It's called Founders Edition. Newsletter goes out every Friday. Thanks to everybody for listening. Thank you to you two for joining. This was super fun.
Super fun. Thanks, Colin.
Thank you.